If there's one thing we have learned this entire time in this course, is that there is nothing static about being a web developer. Improvements are constantly made all the time in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And even the browsers get constantly updated. Libraries are also constantly being created. If you remember, libraries are just pieces of code. They could be CSS, they could be HTML, they could be JavaScript. Pieces of code written by somebody else so that we can use it, so we don't have to start from scratch. Now, it's human nature to want to constantly improve. And in this video, we're going to learn the new features that everybody will be using. But first, let's recap something from our previous videos. If you remember, JavaScript was created by the Netscape browser, and everybody else, all the other browsers, started using JavaScript. So Netscape submitted JavaScript to something called the ECMA International, so that JavaScript could be standardized and they could say, hey, everybody use this version of JavaScript on all browsers. That's what ECMAScript is. ECMAScript is, well, it's JavaScript, but it's just the standard way of calling it so that when the browsers implement what JavaScript should do and how they read JavaScript, well, everybody agrees on the standard. Now, every time you see something like this, like ES6, and you'll see that quite a lot, ES6 just stands for ECMAScript version 6. So yes, there was ECMAScript version 1 all the way through 6, and we're currently at version 7, but it's still new, so we're only learning version 5 and version 6 for now. But version 5 and version 6 introduce some new features that are really, really powerful and make coding in JavaScript really, really nice. And most code bases that you'll see in 2018 will be using these features. So it's a very, very exciting topic for me. It's one of my favorite parts of JavaScript now. And I'm excited to show you some of these new features that will make your life a whole lot easier. Now, one thing you might be thinking though is, Andre, I don't want to learn something if browsers don't support them and I can't actually use them. But don't worry, my friend. These are all features that are supported. You know why? Well, mainly because of something called Babel. You see, a few years ago, a programmer created Babel so that developers can start using new JavaScript features as they come. Remember, ECMAScript releases versions all the time. Now, without having to wait for browsers to implement these features, Babel allowed us to use them right away. Now, how do they do that? Let's have a look. If I go into try it out here, you'll see that Babel shows me something. I can write, and we'll learn the syntax soon enough, don't worry. I can write something like this, which is the new way of writing JavaScript with ECMAScript 6. And it compiles into this. Now, what does that mean? It means that it reads a file line by line and then changes it to a version of JavaScript that all browsers know, and it works on all browsers. When we actually deploy our application or website, which means putting it online after we're done with it, we can use Babel to say, hey, read our JavaScript file and transform it into this so it works on all browsers. So without even thinking about it, you can write all your code in the newest and best way of writing it. You can see how clean this is. And Babel will take care of changing everything for you so that browsers can read it. Isn't that awesome? Enough of that. Let's learn some new syntaxes. And don't be afraid, ES5 and ES6 made JavaScript a whole lot easier and more fun to write. From now on, we'll take what we learned in this video to write all our code because it's what the industry is using right now. And this is what you will get asked during interviews. So let's get started. The first feature I'm going to show you is let and const. These are actually very, very simple. These are new ways of declaring variables. So if you see over here in our section outline, you see that JavaScript variables has now two new ways of declaring a variable. And as a matter of fact, variable that we've been using up to this point, we don't really need to use it ever again. We now have something called let. To show you how both of these work, let's do a small example. I'm going to say const player, and const stands for constant. We'll say Bobby, and we'll say let experience equals to 100, and we'll say let wizard level equal to false. Now if I do something like if experience is greater than 90, then equals to true. Okay, so these look like variables, nothing's different. Let's run this through the console and see what happens. Okay, if I now check wizard level, I get false. That's strange, right? Because in the previous video where we talked about scope, if I had wizard level as a variable, I would have gotten true here. So if this was variable and this was variable, wizard level, instead of being false, will be true. Now, that's confusing, right? That's because it's not inside of a function. This is a little bit tricky, but with variable, we only were able to create a scope inside of a function, but never if it had curly brackets, but inside of if. With let, when I say let and let, well, now I've created a wizard level variable inside of if. So the only way that I can access this is inside the if. If I do console.log wizard level here and console.log wizard level outside, and then let's put inside and outside. If I copy this, paste it in, inside, I get true. Outside, I get false. Because now with let, anytime it's wrapped around a curly bracket, well, it creates a new scope. Versus with a variable, if I change this to a variable, and I copy this again and refresh, if I copy this, I get inside equals to true and outside equals to true because wizard level has already been changed. No new scope is created inside the curly brackets because this isn't a function. Now, I know that's really, really confusing, but the one big takeaway from this is just don't use variable anymore. Variable is actually quite confusing. Now, think of let as the new variable. So from now on, we're going to be using let for variables. But what is const? Well, const is even cooler. Watch this. If I want to change the experience level, I can say experience equals 80. And now if I look at experience, well, experience equals 80. But if I want to change the player, Bobby, to a new name, equals Sally, I get an error. Assignment to constant variable. What that means is a constant you're not able to reassign to the variable. So it cannot be updated. Now, why would that be useful? It's really, really useful because a lot of bugs happen when you're working in a team of people if you have something like player and somebody changes the name of the player while you're working on a program and you still think it's Bobby and you keep getting errors because somebody else has touched it, well, that's a bit of an issue, isn't it? But using const, you make sure that this player variable will always have the same value. So this is actually very, very useful. And my recommendation is that if you have anything that isn't going to change, it should be a constant. So a function could be a constant because, well, if the function or if the assignment of A is not going to change, then we feel a lot safer using const than, let's say, let, because we make sure that nobody assigns something else to A. So the rule from now on is use const if you're using a variable that doesn't change. Most of the time you'll use this. And if you're using a variable that you reassign something to, like wizard level where it changes from true to false, false to true, well then use let. One thing with const that you have to keep in mind is that if you do a const object equals player Bobby experience 100 and wizard level to false. Well, if I copy this object and try to reassign this object to, let's say, a number, I get an error because it's a constant. But if I try and change a property, now my wizard level is to true. So one thing with constant is you can change the properties of the object still, you just can't reassign the variable. All right, on to more fun things. Let's do destructuring. And these ones that I'm going to show you are going to make your life a whole lot easier. Again, if we actually have our object here, let's say that we wanted to grab these objects. So we'll have to do const player equals object.player. We'll do const experience equals object dot experience, and then let wizard level equals object dot wizard level. And that was a whole lot of typing to access these properties. Well, with destructuring, you can do this. You can say const player and experience from the object. So with this syntax, it does the exact same thing as the first two lines over here. You just select the properties you want from an object, and now you have const player and experience available to you. So you can use player anywhere you want in your code base. And then for let, we can do wizard level equals object. Much, much cleaner. You just have to get used to it, but it's a lot nicer to look at. All right, another cool thing you can do with objects. Const name equals Jon Snow. We can just start a new object here, and we can say now name is hello, and we can do Ray Smith hi. All right, so this is a silly object, but I wanted to show you some new ways of declaring object properties. Now in ES6, you can have, instead of the old way of having just player or experience or wizard level, we can have something dynamic that we can assign, like Jon Snow, or we can do Ray plus Smith, or we can do 1 plus 2. and have these dynamic property values. Let me show you how they work. If I access the object now, I have 3 equals hi hi and Jon Snow equals hello. So again, new ways of declaring properties, very useful if you need to calculate something for the property value. But even cooler is being able to do something like this. Imagine you had a const A equals to Simon, const B equals to true, and const C is an empty object. And if we wanted to add these to an object, we would have had to do A is A, B is B, and C is C. And sometimes you wanted the property to match the value. Again, with the new JavaScript, if property and value are the same, in that case, we can just say A, B, C. So we can remove the declaration that we had with property and value if they're the same and just keep it like this. Again, this is something that when we get to the React section, it's going to become very, very useful. All right, something even more fun. And this time it's template strings. So template strings. Now, remember when we have, let's say, a greeting, how annoying it was that we had to do hello, name, plus you seem to be doing, plus greeting. And then let's say you had an exclamation mark. And you also had to worry about backslash if you had an apostrophe. That was really tedious and annoying. Now, you can do something really fun. Instead of doing it this way, you can have greeting best equals something called template strings. And these are backticks. So the backticks, this is right above your tab key if you're on a Mac. Instead of using double quotes or single quotes, this means template strings. And now you can use double quotes or single quotes anywhere you want, and it'll be a string. But even cooler, if you have name equals Sally and age equals 34, pet is horse. Now we can do hello, name, you seem to be, notice the syntax and the coloring, age minus 10. What a lovely pet you have. So notice what we did here. I'm going to copy this just so we have it. I'm going to comment this out. Now, if I look into the console, I'll refresh. You see that now, instead of doing all that double quotes and plus and worrying about spacing, within these backticks, I can say a piece of string and then add dynamically by using the $, then the curly brackets, a value that we want. We can, again, do any sort of expression. So age minus 10. What a lovely pet you have. Let's see what happens. If I do greeting best, look at that. Hello, Sally. You seem to be 24. What a lovely horse you have. Very cool. So this is very, very useful. We'll be definitely using this later on in the course. Another thing I want to show you is default arguments. I can do something like greet. We'll say name equals empty string, age equals 30, and we'll say pet is cat. Let's just copy what we had before with the greeting. I'm going to comment this out. and we'll return this. So nothing's changed. We just have a function that returns a greeting. The only thing that's new is this. Let me show you what it does. If I comment this out, I copy this, put it into the console, and now I run greet. Hello, you seem to be 20. What a lovely cat you have. Do you catch that? Even though our browser, and let me just refresh so you know for sure that our browser has no idea of what age or pet is. But if I run this function, because of the way I made the parameters, I gave them default arguments, which says if I don't provide a value for name, which I haven't given any arguments, well, then make name, empty string, make age 30, and make pet cat. If I do now, greet John 50, and we'll do monkey. Now I get, hello John, you seem to be 40. What a lovely monkey you have. This gets ignored because I've passed it parameters, but otherwise I can pass a default parameter so that when somebody calls this function and they don't provide these arguments, my function won't fail because, well, I have default arguments. Very cool. All right, what else do we have? Let's refresh here. If you remember, we had one more type to do, JavaScript types, and that is a symbol. It's actually not used very often, but I wanted to show you just because, well, it's a type and we want to complete the 7 types of JavaScript. And a symbol is special because if I have symbol 1, I create a symbol by doing this syntax. And I could have a second symbol that is symbol. And within here, we can put anything. We can put foo and variable symbol 3 equals symbol, and we'll say foo as well. What's so unique about symbols? Oh, and we should be using let here. If I copy this and I access sim1, I get symbol. I access sim2, I get foo. And sim3, I get foo. But the unique thing is that if I do sim2 equals sim3, I get false, even though, well, they look like they're the exact same thing. And symbols are used because they create these completely unique type so that you can make sure there's never going to be any conflict. And the symbol value is used as an identifier mostly for object properties. It's pretty much the only purpose of that because sometimes you don't want object properties, if you have thousands of them, to collide and be the same ones because then you'll get bugs. We won't see it too much in the course. You won't see it out in the wild too much, but I wanted to show you it regardless because, well, we want to know all the JavaScript types. All right, one last one. I know we've covered a lot, but this is the best one. And that is arrow functions. Up to this point, if we wanted to do something like add, we had to do a B and return A plus B. And you might have gotten sick and tired of constantly writing function over and over and over. Well, now you have arrow functions. So with an arrow function, you can do look at that. So anytime you see this syntax, and I had to pass A and B here as well. Anytime you see this syntax, it's the same thing as saying function. But now it's just a shorthand form so that you don't have to constantly write function. And the beauty of it is that you could have done return A and B, and that completely works. So the only difference is that we have a function expression that accepts a parameter and we have this fat arrow. But with an arrow function, if you have a single return, well, you can just put it on one line and it assumes that you want to return this. If I save this and copy it in here, I don't need this syntax. Let's copy that one more time. Add 4 and 2. That's the first function. And then the new way with the arrow function, add 2 for 2. Again, I get the same thing. It returns automatically because everything, well, it's on one line. It looks very, very nice, a lot easier to write than the above. And there you have it. I know that was a lot of information. Make sure you do the exercises after this video to get yourself familiar with the syntax. It's just new ways of doing things. These are going to help you to write better, cleaner code. And just to show you what we've covered, well, you've managed to finish everything in the section outline. From variables to conditionals to finally the arrow function. We've covered everything that we've wanted to for JavaScript. And moving forward, we're going to be using these new syntaxes to write our code. I hope you're excited as I am to start using these. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.